What's up, everyone? Back at it again. It is DW Darkwing Dad. This is my little rendition, my how-to on the recent Elegoo and do3d contest. It was a Thor hammer, a print and paint contest. Of course, I did something a little bit different. Just wanted to give you a glimpse of how I did it, the paint scheme, some of my techniques, and how I got my Mjolnir looking pretty cool like this. We'll have some awesome end shots. What I want to get into now is my printing, all my settings, and all my prep that I got to get the hammer looking pretty cool like this. Without any further ado, let's get into it. So here's a quick overview of the file. You can see all the pieces that are involved in printing this hammer. I printed all of the parts on my CR6 SE and my CR10 V2. I used primarily 0 silk filament just to try to get it as smooth as possible and cut down on as much sanding as I can because it's a very intricate piece, as you can see. 0.2 layer height, around 15% infill. For the most part, the pieces did, fit in pretty good. There's obviously some sanding and some prepping that I needed to do. One thing I can say is the side little covers here that were on the end of the hammer, the ones on the one side I actually had to scale down about 4% because they wouldn't fit. If you take the ones and try to slid them in there, you see they just don't fit. So they had to get scaled down. I'm not sure if that was just a glitch in do3d system, but that was really the only adjustment that had to be made. Everything lined up and fit very well. So once I had all the pieces kind of prepped and inspected, it was time to get on to doing some sanding. Due to the fine details of this hammer, there really wasn't a lot of putty I could get on to get it completely smooth. So obviously the flat areas where I could fold some sandpaper over or sand it by hand, get rid of some of those seams and just some of those blemishes from the print, I went ahead and did that, put some putty on, resanded it. But really for the most part, it was just utilizing Bondo filler primer. Great filler primer. I talk about it a lot on this channel. But basically I would just do a couple coats, let it dry. It was dry in about 15 minutes, ready to sand. The handle came out really nice. And then it was just folding sandpaper over and getting all those fine detail areas. It really pushed my patience, and it really makes me want to get a larger resin printer. But overall, I would just, fold some sandpaper over, try to get in those nitty-gritty areas, and then finish it off with 600 grit so it was nice and smooth. You can see right here, pretty good progress with it. It's looking pretty smooth, pretty nice. So after I would do that sanding, I would apply a final layer of filler primer. After that was dry, I got into doing a black semi-gloss base coat because we are going to be using a color shift paint here, which does require a black base coat. You don't always have to do gloss, a semi-gloss. It doesn't have as much orange peel, especially if you're using a rattle can. So that's why I went with the semi-gloss. Once I did a couple coats of that, you really want to make sure all the primer is covered and there's no gray or anything leaching through, because that will affect the color of the Chameleon paint. But you can see here, looking pretty good for an FDM print, if I don't say so myself. Like I said, a lot of work getting in those nitty-gritty areas. But I did use Rustoleum color shift. The first one was a magenta to copper to gold. What stinks about this is I wanted to do more of the hammer, that color, the little side insert pieces, but the nozzle ended up clogging, no surprise. So the one time I use rattle can, it kicks me in the butt. But I used a blue to green to purple color shift on the main hammer and on the ends. That came out really awesome. One really important thing to remember too, if you're ever using anything like a color shift paint or a metallic paint, you do not want to try to put these on, very heavy. You want to do light multiple coats. I did 4 light coats with this. Understand, if you get a run or anything in this paint, you're going to have to start all over. It is going to pull those metallic flakes down with it and distort the pattern of the paint. So always light coats. I was very surprised. It was actually a really nice paint. It sprayed very well. You can see here that the results are pretty awesome. I wasn't about to jump in and spend $300-400 on some PPG Chameleon paint. So the Rustoleum, which I know gets mixed reviews from a lot of people in the 3D print community, this was actually a pretty solid paint. It wasn't too bad at all. At the end, once I started getting some clear coat and everything on here, you can see here, it really came out awesome. I played it safe. I did not use a 2K clear. I did not want it to damage the paint. I didn't know how it would react being a rattle can. So I just used some basic old Rustoleum 2X clear. I knew it would be okay with the Rustoleum paint. Again, it's something that a lot of people, they you know, they play with, you know, with rattle cans. They try doing different clear coats, and you really should stick with the proper manufacturer to manufacturer. If you're using Rustoleum, use Rustoleum clear. If you're using a Krylon, Duplicolor, etc., etc. But you can see here that, you know, once the clear was on, it really started making those colors pop. Really did look awesome. Really nice, cool little touch to this Mjolnir build. Initially, these inserts, I was going to paint the magenta to copper to gold, but as luck would have it, the nozzle got jammed and all of the paint sprayed out before I could get these prepped and ready to go. So I ended up getting a Duplicolor paint that went from green to purple, and you can see it's a little bit different than the Rustoleum. So it was still a nice accent, a little bit more subtle, still came out great on the piece. Once those were all cured and everything, I had a Duplicolor 1K clear, put those on the inserts, and then went back to the Rustoleum 2X on the ends of the hammer. Those little inserts that you see there, those are just templates to keep paint from building up, so don't worry about that. Then it was on to the handle of the hammer, and it being a color shift that went from magenta to copper to gold, I thought it would be cool to add some gold accents because it just looked kind of boring and bland without them. So I took some gold rub and buff, kind of worked it over the ridges of the handle, and it really was an awesome accent for the piece. It really made it come out, you know, pretty cool. It was a tedious process because it would kind of smudge on the handle, and then I'd have to clean it up with the mineral spirits there. But overall, when it was done, it really came out awesome. After everything sat for about 24 hours, it was assembly time. So I put a 1/4-inch rod all the way through the hammer from the bottom to the top, that way to give it some stability, reinforced it with some E6000, and then on the opposite end of the hammer, put some more E6000, put that cap on, got some super glue, started putting some stuff together, and here we go. As far as assembling the hammer went, it was nothing out of the unordinary. You kind of seen in that last slide, I had the metal rod that went through the middle of it just to kind of help stabilize a little bit more. I just went to a craft store and just got a basic piece of black leather just to kind of mimic that strap. This top piece here, I did use a little bit of adhesive. I did use some E6000. I've spoke before on that. It is flexible, but for this, a little bit of cushion isn't going to really hurt it. Pretty solid with that rod in the middle. These end pieces here, all I used was just a little bit of super glue. Big tip, if you're ever doing anything with a recessed edge like this had, what I did is I actually printed extra of these little decorative pieces, and I placed them in there as I was priming them, as I was painting them, as I was clear coating them, because that paint will build up over time and it's going to make that cavity a little bit smaller and these pieces won't fit. So by placing these templates over them, the paint wouldn't build up. So I really was able just to do a couple dabs of super glue, pushed them in there, held them on there for 30 seconds. They glued no problem. The end pieces here, you may notice that they actually showed on the slide that there are magnets, but you really don't need that. It did accumulate a little bit of paint on the edges, so that paint made it a little bit tighter. Take a towel on each end and just basically push, and they clicked right in place. Big tip though, when you are painting stuff and if you do have to assemble, make sure you're giving your clear ample time to dry. Obviously with this, you know, if you put your clear on, you know, too heavy or just not giving enough time and you apply any pressure, anything like that, you can get the fingerprint marks or the towel marks or anything like that. So very important, I cycled this between the heat of my shed and the AC of my house. Good to cycle paint in different temperatures. It just helps them cure faster. It does let the solvents gas a little bit quicker. You know, this has been done for well over 24 hours. It still has a little bit of the fume, so believe it or not, that paint isn't fully cured. However, it is nice and dry, so always make sure you're giving yourself plenty of time before you start handling your model. After that, it was pretty much just double checking everything, making sure everything was glued in place, nice and clean. This is just gonna be a really cool display piece. The little things that I did here by adding the gold accents to the handle, I think that came out really awesome. Definitely a very unique, one-of-a-kind hammer. Hopefully in the end, brings me some ranking in this Elegoo contest. If not, had an awesome time making it and definitely created a one-of-a-kind piece. Much it for this video and for this build. Hopefully this was a nice little tutorial, kind of going a little bit outside of my realm, use some random colors on the fly. I figured doing a Mjolnir like this with this custom color scheme would maybe get some attention for the contest. Definitely some of the posts that I put out there, the people have seen it, they were, you know, pretty wowed by it. And if it doesn't win, I can definitely say that I have a, you know, a one-of-a-kind Mjolnir. The Chameleon paint, really cool. You don't necessarily always need professional, you know, spray guns and things like that. You can still do a pretty good job finishing your helmets, finishing your props. Consider this hammer a pretty good job. Is it perfect? No. Is it 100% DW caliber? It's almost there. I was really pushed on time on this. The prep and, you know, the sanding, the filling, the painting, the clear coat, the assembly, all of that was basically done in a week. Of course, living in Florida, it was raining like crazy. There were some days where it was just too humid. I would have to literally take my rattle cans and put them inside in the AC or sometimes even in the fridge to cool them down enough. Humidity is no joke here in Florida, but there are a lot of ways you can get around it. So another tip for you guys, you know, if you are using rattle cans and you're dealing with humidity, you know, they're gonna perform a lot better when it's cool versus leaving them in a shed or in a garage where it's really hot. Just take these tips and tricks for what they're worth, apply them to your own. Let me know how you make out. If you liked the video and found it helpful, please go ahead and give me a thumbs up. If you have any questions, comments, or just feedback, go ahead and drop me a comment. Always love hearing from you guys. Let me know what you think of the Thor hammer. If you like it, go ahead and drop me a comment. Let me know what you think. Big shout out to Elegoo and do3d. Thank you so much for hosting this contest. Like I said, they have not announced any of the winners. It just wrapped up the other day. Fingers crossed on the DW side. Love sharing this content with you guys. Let me know what you think. Give me a thumbs up and drop me a comment on what you thought of the hammer. That's it for now, guys. I'm gonna wrap up. I got some other projects gonna do. I got some more content on the way for you, so I gotta get going on to these next projects. So for now, DW out. Later.